This is awkward. Years later, thinking about this, I can still feel certain difficulty. So let's get started. When I was young, I wasn't particularly good at ball games. And in fact, I can remember playing cricket in the park just with a bunch of other boys. And this was about the age of 5 and getting told, you throw like a girl. And what do I do with that? This is something which reoccurred from time to time. I can remember, so early teenager, probably still the same thing. Organised games. And I mention this because, as I say, I still feel a little bit off about this. But when somebody says something like that, what's really going on? What's this actually about? Why do you say it? What happens when it's said to you? What's the implication behind this? You can hear the hesitation in my voice. Unusually a little bit difficult getting going. Something here, something going on. And I think it's amazing that kind of, how many, half a century later, still in however small a fashion, this matters. In fact, mattering's the kind of heart of it. Because what I'm talking about here, obviously, and we don't necessarily have to use this word, but the experience is familiar to us all, and I think absolutely central to what it is to be a human being, and a human being in society, and in particular maybe a human being in this kind of society. What I'm talking about is shaming and shame. And it's clearly about gender, and it's clearly intended as a slur, there's no question about that. You throw like a girl. You throw like what you aren't. So what's throwing like a girl about? Well, it's a weak throw. It's an inaccurate throw. It's a throw that's imagining how girls throw. And there are, various arguments around this which we could go into. And maybe one of the few but significant shifts in our way we think about gender is actually that now finally we take women's sport seriously. So maybe the slur doesn't work today in quite the way it did when I was young. But it's saying, no, there's a sense in which you're throwing like a girl shows that you aren't a real boy, a real man. You're actually, symbolically, a girl. And that's a bad thing because boys are better than girls. You might say they're just different, but no, you can't reverse the slur. You can't say to a girl, oh, you throw like a boy, how pathetic. No, because girls are weak, they're inaccurate, they're not strong, they're not. So what's the point of this? Well, obviously you say this because it makes you feel better. I belong. I'm as I should be. I'm correctly male. You, not so much. So we can make an in-group and an out-group, and we can do that along the lines of gender. Okay, yeah, nothing very remarkable about that. But what's interesting is that this is also, it's social education, isn't it? It's saying, if you don't want this to keep cropping up time and time again in this context, you better damn well learn to throw like a boy. So do I go away and practice my throwing endlessly until I can become the next England fast bowler? Do I go, well, hell, I am a girl, but I can still throw. Become the next England women's fast bowler? Or do I just retreat to my bedroom forever? Or do I play the game and just hurl the insult back? And of course, once I'm playing the game of gender and gendering others, misgendering as part of gendering. And so it's an education as to how to be a boy, how to be a man. And women, of course, in different ways get exactly the same thing. So is this kind of gently trying to align me on what's socially acceptable in a boy, a man? Or is it actually, basic gender fascism? Be this way or else. Or be this way if you want to be part of our club, part of our team. The thing which I think is interesting here, in the way that I'm going to spin this argument, is this about something I do or have done, or is this about something I am? You see, normally when we think about shame, we think about it purely from the point of view of the person that's experiencing it. We think about, there's good shame. That's your guilty conscience. You're feeling bad. You've done something wrong. You should feel bad about it. This pain is correcting you. Yeah, but have I done anything wrong? Throwing like a girl? No. And then we say, on the other hand, there's toxic shame. This is shame that points to you as a person, what you are, and we'll come back to this. If your parents ignore you, if they show that you just don't matter, you might well get the idea, or they tell you you're stupid, or you're an idiot, or you ruined my life. You might well get the idea, I'm awful, I'm a bad person. You say, yes, that's toxic shame, that's really bad. But it kind of hinges on this, something you've done or something you are distinction. I think I want to argue that actually breaks down, because that's not really, breaks down when we look at it, because that's not really what shaming's about, fundamentally. Because I want to argue that shaming, there's no shame without shaming, there's no shame without a shamer, and that this is always social, and it's always to do with power. It's always to do with status in some form or another. It's to do with recognising, and we've talked about recognition of you as the real person that you are out there or not. And if I don't recognise you, I can withhold things from you. I can not look at you. I can not take you seriously. I can feel perfectly happy then, because I don't take you as a real person anymore, to do anything to you, potentially. So we can think about shame in terms of this conscience pricking us, or we can think about it, shame in this context, this particular act of shaming, how does this play out in terms of status, in terms of power? And that gets us right back to the point of the seventh precept, which is what we're, kind of wandering around. Traditionally, not praising self at the expense of others, or not praising yourself while abusing others. I bear witness to the elevation of the self and the denigration of others by myself and in the world, and aspire to meet others on equal ground. Well, this business of shaming and experiencing shame is the fundamental way that we don't do that. I want to make what feels like a much bigger claim, which is that actually, we don't like shame. We don't like experiencing it. And by shame, I mean embarrassment, I mean humiliation, I mean just feeling queasy, I mean having somebody in your face, I mean all of these things. But we don't like this, and so what do? Basic Buddhism. Things we like, we turn towards. Hello. Things we don't like, we turn away from. And how do we turn away from them? We zone out. We dissociate and come back as somebody else. Don't worry about that. We get angry because that's a response, and our anger's good. It's active. Yes, I'm me. I can deal with this. Or we distract ourselves. We decide to switch the TV on, or scroll, or make a cup of tea, or walk the dog. It doesn't really matter. But we'll avoid that bad feeling. And it is, these, we don't dare go near these. And this is hence the, becoming a bigger container, which I'm always talking about. Dare we go near any of this stuff? Can we? It can be horrible. It can be awful. It can overwhelm us. This is, for some of us, this is closely tied up with real trauma. So, caution advised always, but we don't go near this. And in a sense, like you have apps running in the background on your phone. And if it, notification, yes, this is going on. In a sense, our shame awareness runs in the background the whole time, looking at, don't go there, don't do that in that way, don't. Because actually, this kind of shame as social education governs everything we do. I'm talking about throwing like a girl, but it's the words I choose, the way I shape a sentence, the way I gesture with my hand, the way I sit down, the way I walk. Everything. This is literally part of everything. And if we have this shame awareness, potential awareness, beep, 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 running in the background the whole time, we're not even going to notice most of the things. And we grow into the people that we are. Hey, it's just how I am. It's just natural. Well, yes and no. So, we turn away, and basic Buddhism, we turn towards, we turn away. And anything difficult in that sense, the shameful sense. And shame is a terrifying emotion because it's about not being part of. It's about being lesser than. It's about being vulnerable to. And we're social animals. And we don't want to be excluded. We don't want to be on the outside. And we don't want to always have to pay permanent deference. Relationship, recognition is what we are. This mutuality, and anything which runs against that, anything which blocks that, is difficult, potentially terrifying. And so we shame others, we are shamed, and we can be shamed. Well, any power gradient, if you like. Any time there's an inside and an outside, or a higher and a lower. So we can shame about gender, we can shame about race, we can shame about somebody's education, we can shame about their ability or their disability. We can shame about their lack of wealth, we can shame about them being obese, we can shame. And these things always run in one direction. We can try shaming the rich, but we see every day the poor being shamed. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't try hard enough. You can do anything if you really want to. Let's take this minute shift in what our British Labour Party sees as its mission. Not the party of the workers, but the party of work. Your obligation as a human being is to provide a certain quantity of work in the national interest. And if you can't, or if you don't, then clearly it's shameful and you should be shamed. There is a moral argument for withdrawing benefits from the disabled, apparently. There's now a scandal about the provision of vehicles for disabled people. Completely made up, and we even know the exact right-wing Twitter account or, talk forum that it comes from. They've identified it, and it goes through the Daily Mail, GB News, the rest of it. And now suddenly it's a scandal. And we even find our Secretary for Health going, yes, this needs investigating because these people are getting something they're not entitled to. How shameful. And this business of shame and its connection with care, because we say, oh yes, we'll always take care of the disabled. We'll always look after them in a way which hopefully isn't the same way that the mafia takes care of or looks after people. But that's not real work. Just like all the work that people do providing care, some of which is paid, some of which, well, a vast amount of which is unpaid. And again, let's see how that works out by gender. Do we not value care work because women tend to do it, or do we not value women's work because it tends to be care work? Again, we're making higher and lower, real and unreal. But flow of shame always goes from higher to lower, or almost always. As soon as we've identified and watched the patterns of shaming and taken part in the patterns of shaming, seen the patterns of shaming, we can see that in withholding our recognition, or in the government's withholding its recognition, it then feels that this negates any sense of obligation. If you shame somebody you don't recognise, you withdraw your recognition from them. You then don't feel obligated to them as a human being. And if you have the potential to help them or not, or offer them resources or withhold resources, then this fact of shaming, this withdrawal of recognition, which we can talk about in terms of withdrawal of empathy as well. No, I don't recognise you as the real, full, rich, myriad, multiple, unbelievable human being that you actually are. Because the second we do that, we can withdraw our empathy, we can withdraw our offer of assistance, we can withdraw our care, because, and the message is clear, you don't matter. Mattering is psychologically important, but mattering can be desperately important materially as well. If you really don't matter, you can starve. So our shaming, we turn away from our shame, but in shaming we turn away from the other. So strangely, in experiencing shame, I want to turn away from myself. No, that's not me. I'm not like that. Help. But in shaming others, we turn away from the other. But also, through this strange mutual nature of relationship, not separate, what we truly are, in turning away from the other, we always turn away from ourselves also. And obviously this is something we learn as children. We feel the sting of shame as we are shamed, intentionally or unintentionally by our parents. They may not. You're dreadful, you're an awful child. Well, no. But they don't always have time for us. They're ratty, they have real lives. It's difficult. God, heavens, it's difficult being a parent. But as a child, we don't always appreciate that. And for better reason or worse, we get the sense, more or less, that we don't matter. And hopefully our relationship is rich enough and strong enough to work that through and come back. But we all understand this experience of being shamed, and we all learn to shame others as part of our play, as a fundamental means of getting our own way. Or attempting to get our own way at least. I began with gender shaming. I'll go on and just point out one more example of this. Nothing to do with me specifically. Our criminal justice systems involve shaming. They involve taking people at difficult points of their lives who may or may not have done things which are dreadful. There's no argument there. But we place them in shameful conditions. We show them in every way, every possible way, that they don't matter. We give them a vile environment. We take away the basics, even underwear, that actually is the way of organising your own life and feeling okay about yourself. We take away their ability to organise their own time, all their possessions, and we all know how important possessions are in this society. We show them by the systems of discipline that we initiate that they don't matter. Above all, we don't listen to them. And again, there are some brilliant people working in prisons, and I've met in my 12 years as a prison chaplain many really good, positive, committed prison officers who were not vile, not intent on shaming, and yet still the system produces this effect of, as soon as you're in prison, you're effectively guilty in every possible context until proven innocent. Not about the crime that you may have committed, but everything and anything. In these situations, it's horrendously difficult for those who do find themselves the wrong side of the law in prison to actually begin to come to terms with their own experience of, their own feelings about what they've done, because we just effectively immerse them in this bath of shaming. Our shame individualizes us. And in fact, that seems to be one of its most important functions, because in a way that's maybe exactly opposite from the way that, our sex does, and we feel, oh yes, this is the heart of me. Shame is like the bad heart of me. Shame is mine. I have only myself to blame, and that's the whole message of shame. It takes us apart. It moves us apart. And it makes us into an individual because we are now separate from the group. We have no proper place within society. This wouldn't even be such a problem in prison were it not for one thing, which is that it has been seriously argued that almost all male violence, and let's face it, it is overwhelmingly, beyond overwhelmingly, men that act violently enough to get themselves put into prison, that actually all male violence is about shaming, about the rejection of shame. And it works like this, and this is the theory of James Gilligan, the American psychologist who basically ran psychology within the Massachusetts prison system, so statewide for about a decade, and then got fired when the Republican governor got in and wanted to be tough on crime, and so actually addressing the real issues behind it went straight out the window. It works roughly like this. To be a man is to be powerful and to be strong. To be shown that you're not powerful and not strong is to experience shame. Because in our society, men are strong and women are weak in this kind of strange, twisted gender logic that is the foundation of gender, never equal, but always hierarchical. To be shown you're weak is to be made symbolically female. As a man, when you're put up against the wall, under extreme stress, told that you are a failure in whatever sense, and the reason why people end up in prison is never, or incredibly rarely, one simple factor. It's usually a whole raft of complex interacting causes, various kinds of stressor, often economic, social particularities, whatever. When you're put up the wall as a man and you're called out and shamed because actually you are being placed in a position of relative weakness, or somebody's challenging your status, you try shaming back, and if that doesn't work, where do you go? You have only one possible recourse. If you're rich, if you're highly educated, there are alternatives. You can buy your way out. You can smart your way out. But if you're not, you have only one recourse, which is to hit out, either literally or symbolically, with the message, no, I am not a woman. I am a man. I'm a real man. Take that. Because to live as shamed, to live with the inescapable experience of that shame, which has you against the wall, is impossible. It's a kind of experience of death. It is the experience of exclusion, the experience of not mattering. If I'm told you don't matter, you don't matter, you don't matter, I need to do something, and push comes to shove, quite literally, the only thing I can do is push back. And if shouting doesn't work, and if shaming doesn't work, and if insult doesn't work, it's going to get physical. And so my question is, why would you take people whose experience of shame has made them assert their masculinity in the only way they know how? I am not a woman. Why would you put them in a pit of shame and close the lid and ramp up the temperature and expect that somehow to have good results, expect them to be able to process their experience, their environment, their reactions to people? I think I'd have to suggest that this in itself was highly shameful. Shame individualizes us, and perhaps the criminal justice system is the absolute epitome of this. You have been found guilty. You have been identified. You have been shown to be shameful. And it would be okay if it was, well, it would be better perhaps if you could actually just abstract and say, this isn't about you, not the rich, wonderful, multifaceted, multiple human being that you actually are. This is just, you did that, so sorry, but this is how it's going to be. Because ultimately, in practice, we find we can never make that distinction adequately. And there's a sense in which, well, if I did do something unspeakable 20 years ago, I am not going to be the same person. And yet, and this is something that the guys in prison used to say all the time, well, I'm not that person anymore. And of course the answer is, well, in a sense you are, and in a sense you aren't. And the problem was, yes, but the prison system doesn't recognise. And actually usually hasn't helped them to work through and work out in which ways they still are that person and in which ways they have moved on, they have changed, they're different. It's complicated. So shame individualises us. It always wants to just cut us out. Because then we are left with our vulnerability. And what do we do when we feel vulnerable? Well, hopefully if we're a Zenny, we sit with it. We learn to sit. We learn to become this bigger container capable of holding our experiences, holding our emotions, holding our own feelings of vulnerability, holding our experience of shame. Not simply dissociating from it, not always being somewhere else, but actually capable of literally holding it without feeling the need to do something with it, give it to somebody else, to offer it back as shaming, as violence. And shaming is always a kind of violence. And so when we're shamed, we've experienced violence. And we might say, well, you're thrown like a girl is completely trivial. And in a sense, obviously it is. And that's part of the deal. Because actually, the things we can feel shame about can be tiny. But that doesn't stop them being real. So what might we say? We might say, well, just man up. And actually that's the whole part of the problem, because manning up means stuffing down, repressing, or, getting in your face. It's difficult. It's problematic. So shame always wants to make me different. It wants to make me that individual. And how we really work with shame is by coming to realise that shame is a social function. It's about hierarchy. It's about in-groups and out-groups. On the one hand, we hold the experience. And on the other, we understand that it's not about me. I'm not this uniquely problematic individual. I haven't done the thing that will condemn me forever to walk alone through life. It's not about me. It's about relationship. It's about being in the world. And our way out of shame, and our way out of shaming, because, let's face it, we all do it intentionally or unintentionally, is through and as relationship. You matter. Other people matter. And of course, I matter. We matter together. And that we that matters is finally all beings. Withdraw recognition from none. Deny recognition to none. not easy. But it's serious. It's not just a question of thinking I'm great and you're not. It's not a question of telling myself I'm great and telling you that you're not. Recognition. Yes, you're really there and I'm really here. How do we live life together? How do we share life with all beings?